Richard here. I'm just going to take an overview of the week 5 and have a look at some of the things that you'll be doing in this week. As past people from past courses have said that they find it a bit piecemeal and they don't really get an overview of what it is we're trying to do. So I'll try and add that here by looking at the way we're going to reshape our block and the code that we're going to put into it. So first of all, you'll notice there are a couple of new links in the block here. So let's have a look at what they do. So this one lists all the block instances that are in a particular course. All right, so there they are. And this one is a special one-page wonder, we call it, a table manager that allows you to look through any table in the database and then edit things within it. So here is the output table, and here is the form that is printed along each row. So each of these rows contains its own form with an edit link and a delete link. So if I edit, I've chosen to edit the first name, and we'll see that in a moment, and then save the changes, and you can see the edit has taken place there. So that's what we're trying to do here. Let me get back to my block. Okay, so let's have a look at the list blocks first of all. How did we achieve that link to the list of block instances? We also, in this week, we cover classes. So you'll notice here there's a new folder inside the code, classes, and then there's a local folder inside that, and in here we have a class. So classes are self-contained pieces of code that are auto-loaded when they are needed by Moodle, if they are set up correctly. So we use namespaces, and those of you who are reasonably experienced coders will understand that namespaces are used to prevent conflicts where you might be using public classes, so conflicts between one class and another. So in Moodle we use this convention here, the Frankenstyle plugin name, and then the folder that the class is found within the class structure. So you can see the correspondence there. Now the block data is basically an SQL statement that gets block instances by course, and I didn't write this. I just went to the Moodle ad hoc queries page and took it from there, and I don't believe that I've modified it very much. We don't have time to teach SQL, obviously, but there we go. All this class does, and all this function does, is get records, get block instance records. Okay, so what are we going to do with that data? How are we going to use it? Right, so we're going to need a page to display it on. And here's our block data PHP page, and that's just a standard Moodle page, right? We've seen those before. So we're going to go to our renderer for the block super iframe, and we're going to display the records that we get from the block data class. And you can see there. So we've used block super frame local block data, that we've used this class here, and here we're accessing the function fetch block data. So in here, function fetch block data is part of class block data. So in here, we reference it here, we get the records right here. Okay, so far so good. So now we need to render those records. So in our renderer, we are going to, that's the block content, display the block table. So we're going to use this one here. So I've actually specified the headers. So what I'm going to print out, the ID, name, course, and cat name, and of course those have to go in your language file. And then I'm going to build the rows for each one. remembering that records has returned me a SQL, so it's returned an array of records. Okay, so it shouldn't. Get records SQL. Can't remember. I'll pause for a minute. Okay, we're back. Just had to check that. Yeah, so it returns an array of objects. Okay, the records. So it's an array of objects. Okay, so we create a subarray to hold all the different rows. So the different rows are ID, block name, short name, and cat name. So we build an array of those, and then we add each row to a table data array that is inside our data object. So then that table object, so we declared it there, table standard class, table headers, and then table data equals the data. So that gets filled with one row for each record that is in this array of records. So then we go to our template, block data, to display it. So this is a little more complex, but basically we're using our bootstrap classes here. So we've also need this table caption string inside our language file. So you'll find that in there as well. So we output the table headers in the head part, and then we output the table data row by row, and then cell by cell. Okay, that is pretty standard HTML, to be honest. So that shouldn't present a big problem. We haven't used any particularly fancy formatting here, apart from table responsive and table striped. But you can experiment with other bootstrap classes if you like. So, does that explain to us how we get this list here? I hope so. I hope so. But of course, as ever, you know, ask questions. Please ask as many questions as you like, and we'll get through it. We'll get back to you and help you out with understanding that. So that's a fairly simple process. Now, the other aim this week is to kind of compare and contrast that with the older code that you're going to frequently encounter when you work with Moodle, because you will find pretty much all of the core plugins are still using HTML writer. They're still using local lib instead of classes, so they have their local functions in there. So they would have put this here, public static function, the fetch block data, they would have put it in a local lib class and included it within their plugin. Okay, so it's different, unfortunately. So the table manager, I've already been through the exercises here. So initially when you set it up, it displays a list of courses, but I went through all the exercises to check they still work, and ended up with a user table with these particular fields that I chose. So the table manager is this one-page wonder, right? And it makes that display. So okay, first of all, we have a function that creates an HTML table using Moodle's table object, rather than using a class or anything we set up ourselves. We're not using Mustache here. We're actually using the page to display the data, yeah, using HTML writer functions, and so we're not using templates, and we're not having a separate form. The form is also built into this page, so that's why it's a one-page thing. But again, you will see this technique used. So for us, if we've got used to that nice separation of the data and the output by using, you know, Mustache and renderers and so on, when we come back to look at Moodle core code and come back to look at this is the kind of thing that we're going to have to deal with, I'm afraid. For me, it adds some complexity in just understanding how the page works. But, you know, at some point we have to face it. It's there, and it's going to be there for the next 2, 3, 4, God knows how many years. So you need to know something about it, even as a beginning developer, or you won't be able to do anything at all. Right, rant over, I guess. Okay, so this function, you won't need to do anything with this because it works out what were the keys that you chose from your database and what the data was. So it does all that for you. So it's a bit more sophisticated than my way, the way I did it, because I wanted to keep it super simple. So it's a little more complex. So that takes the worry out of all of that for you. And you won't need to adjust that, I don't believe, for any of the exercises. This you will need to adjust at some point, because this is the name that you're going to be able to edit. And you'll notice I've already done the exercise and changed it to user, and that's why it says first name, because the user first name and not the full name, which was the original code in there, because I've changed user and first name. And these fields, instead of the fields that we had before, which were course, full name, and I don't really remember what the courses were. Okay, so we've added also some parameters. So the action, remember there were links back in the display for edit and delete. So those will define our actions. If you look all the way down to the bottom left of the page, you can see those are appended to the URL edit or delete. So yeah, so those parameters get added to the form. Course related variables. Okay, so that's, yeah, sorry, that's the, yeah, right. So we're on the page now. So we're setting up the page. So we get the course records and the course context. We set all of that, and then now we process the form. Okay. Oh, we've got the render up here as well, so need that. So yeah, so this is just a reference to the SuperFrame Table Management form class, which is this one here, SuperFrame Table Manager form class. There we go. Then we check to see if the cancel button was pressed, and if it was, we'll redirect to our original page, the page URL. And how do we know there are save and cancel buttons on our form? Because we put them on the form with this statement here. And where do we see them? IRL. Well, when we edit, we see a save or cancel button here. So those are on the actual form. So cancel that, and it brings us back to the page. Redirects back to our page URL. So we see that in action here. If on the other hand we got data, so somebody actually filled in here and decided to change Mitchell's name to Mitch. See the change there. So then we would update the record and also redirect back to the same page, so we would see the changes. And again, we're using some call strings here. Right, so page output the header. If it was edit, we will set the data onto the form. So that's this process here, edit. And you can see the URL in the bottom left there. So edit takes that data and pops it into the form right there. Okay, so it sets the data. And then we output the heading, heading for the form, which is this thing here. And and we display the page in the form. That's it. Now, so our table list, how is it created? Remember that it was created by block SuperFrame displaying table, all data. So now we need to get all data. If we're in edit mode, we only need the one record that corresponds to the action item. Yeah, because that's the only record that we're interested in at this point. That's this record here, so it's Alma's record, and it's Alma's record that we're editing there. Okay, and otherwise get all the records in the table. So if we're not editing and we're just viewing and there's no form, we have all the records in the table. So that's why when you want to filter the records, as you're asked to in one of the steps, here is where you want to put in your conditions to filter on. Your course equals course ID or whatever it is you want to put in here and filter them in possibly step 1. Right, so yeah, and then we display it all, and then we finish, and then we're basically done. So, all right. So I hope that will give you a broad brush overview of what we're doing this week, and as to why we're doing it. It's a learning exercise. So if you're not learning something, then you need to pop into the coffee bar and say, help, I don't understand, you made a right mess of this week, can you sort it out for me? And I think that'll do us for this particular video. Thanks for your patience.